Hello, let's look at SAQ number 2 and give you some tips with regard to how to complete it. I would say for letter A, there are quite a few options that we can look at, but one of them I would certainly focus on is Bacon's Rebellion and its aftermath and how it caused slavery, because it served as a turning point in the views of many unhappy indentured servants. The fear over internal rebellion was one reason that led planters to support dramatic increases in the use of imported slaves as opposed to that of indentured servants. Another illustration that you can use is perhaps the profitability of tobacco in the Chesapeake area, or rice and part sugar and indigo there in the Carolinas, led the desire for more of a sustainable workforce, meant taking slaves from Africa and selling them to planters in the British colonies. Looking at letter B, and again, here's a chart that again you should be putting these answers into. I'll go over that in class, but this is the form that we'll be following. Letter B, as a possibility here, is maybe as planters continued to purchase slaves and gender ratios became balanced, slave populations increased due to slave children being born in the British North colonies. Another possibility for letter B could be the laws passed in various colonial legislators not only permitted the perpetuated illegality of race-based chattel system, but it also increased the tension between the poor white farmers and the back slaves. So remember, the Barbados, the Virginia, and the South Carolina slave codes would be a perfect example of this. And going on to letter C would be slaves in the upper southern colonies of Virginia and Maryland were enslaved on tobacco populations and experienced less brutal working conditions than those in the lower southern colonies of South Carolina and Georgia, where they toiled in misery as slaves in the rice plantations. But regardless of the conditions on the plantations, slaves rebelled against their own owners in the upper and lower South. A great example of that would be the Stono Rebellion. Now, going on to question number 3. Letter A. A possible answer for letter A, there's a couple of them that we can consider, is both colonies were populated with dissident religious groups from England and the Puritans in New England and the Quakers in Pennsylvania. Another one is that the Quakers and the Puritans held the goal of providing a safe haven for wanting to reform the practices of the Church of England and make a more pure form of Christianity. Or a third possibility could be violent clashes with the Indians were commonplace in densely populated areas of Massachusetts. And don't forget the few clashes that there were up in the New Amsterdam, where the Dutch were in conflict over land with local tribes. Letter B, some answers could look like the Middle Colonies experienced a much more diverse settlement pattern than their New England counterparts, both in specific religious and ethnic groups. Or another possibility is that the Quakers who settled Pennsylvania recognized Indians' ownership of land and worked to purchase land at the beginning stages of settlement, whereas the Puritans used force to take the land from the native tribes, such as the aftermath of the Metacom's War that we talked about in class. Going on to letter C, again, there are a couple options for you to consider. One of them, if you answered the first part, would be this. Part of the reason for this difference is the impact William Penn's advertisements had on the prospective settlers, because of the way in which he described the land and opportunity and the fact that it was published in a number of languages there in Europe. And if you did the other question is, as a devout pacifist, William Penn wanted to secure the blessing of local Indians as he learned their language and offered to purchase land, whereas Puritans thought if they had left land undeveloped, they were failing God's mission for their settlement. Now on to question number 4. Make sure I do this correct. There we go, question number 4. And if you tackle the first question, I'm just sticking with the ideas of enlightenment. The 7 Years' War has its own list of answers, as does the Great Awakening. So let us focus on, I think right now, the great ideas of the Enlightenment. So I would argue John Locke's social compact theory, many enlightened thinkers embraced the idea that as Americans, they were bound to defend their natural rights against alleged British oppression. This Enlightenment thinking encouraged citizens to question some accepted truths due to the emphasis on human rationale. Now, you can also talk about the Great Awakening if you wanted as well. And this Great Awakening encouraged the colonists to rethink their understanding of God and develop a new personal relationship with God. As a result, Americans did not shy away from questioning accepted norms, and they political or religious, which would later help normalize their questioning of British policies. And this also firmly established uprooting authoritarian figures that they had been experiencing for some time. Going on to question B. An example, if you did the Enlightenment, would be that the ideas expressed in Thomas Paine's pamphlet Common Sense articulate an energetic call to break the bonds of union with the British and form a new country to defend the natural rights of Americans. Another possibility is that no taxation without representation. For many years, the colonists were satisfied with political representation in their respective colonies, yet they were removed from the direct interaction with the British Parliament. However, as the British began to change imperial economic policies, colonists began to assert their rights to a direct or actual representation there in Parliament. And then letter C. We can talk about the Great Awakening was primarily a religious movement that inspired different ethnic, racial, and denominations to strengthen their faith in God, and therefore did not have as great a political impact as the Enlightenment, which was primarily a political movement that affected great American actions towards the British. Well, that's it. Hope this helps. Have a good day and stay classy.